Ryan Grimm, the DC bureau chief for The Intercept, has published a new book titled The Squad, AOC, and the Hope of a Political Revolution. And in this book, he reveals some juicy details about AOC and the squad's relationship, specifically with Nancy Pelosi. And he starts at the beginning when AOC was first elected. He says their first live meeting between AOC and Nancy Pelosi, that is, came in July 2018 at a restaurant in San Francisco. Here are the details of that from this book. The older woman spoke for nearly the entire lunch, dishing out her trademark looping, run-on sentences to her bewildered companions. She just keeps talking. It's a fascinating thing, Shoykat Chakrabarti, then AOC's chief of staff, recalls. We were eating and she just talked the entire time without even taking a break. And I wasn't sure exactly what she was saying, but I was like, okay. Continues on, getting Pelosi's unfiltered thoughts was both eye-opening and disturbing. Ocasio-Cortez, who had made the slogan "Abolish ICE" central to her challenge to Crowley, was particularly perplexed to hear Pelosi say that the phrase had been injected into American political discourse by the Russians and that Democrats needed to quash it. Now, over time, these tensions between Nancy Pelosi and AOC continued to grow. Guardian reported that Pelosi often expressed frustration in 2019, telling the New York Times that AOC and her fellow squad members have their public whatever and their Twitter world, but they didn't have any following. They're 4 people, and that's how many votes they got. In the same fight over immigration policy, Pelosi offered a lecture about how Congress works, saying, some of you are here to make a beautiful pate, but we're making sausage most of the time. And of course, they butted heads over electoral strategy, which I think is the most interesting part of this. It frustrated AOC, who had just won her historic campaign. In one instance, reporting a rare call between the two women, Grimm says AOC told Pelosi that even though she had beaten Joe Crowley, who relied on DCCC vendors and consultants, nobody had reached out to hear how she had done it. I told her DCCC campaign vendors sucked and that it was strange that after I beat Crowley, not a single person bothered to ask how I beat him and how I think we should pay attention and ask questions when that happens to spot weaknesses. She got so mad at me. And we have some more about the relationship between AOC and Nancy Pelosi and how it changed once Nancy Pelosi was no longer the Speaker of the House or leader of the party. But Cenk, this part is fascinating to me specifically, that this historic victory, AOC, relatively unknown individual, doesn't have a career in politics, is not leadership in the party like Crowley, takes him down. And the DCCC doesn't want to investigate how they lost. They don't want to do any sort of introspection. They don't want to have a conversation with her or her team whatsoever. And Nancy Pelosi was livid that she even brought it up.
Yeah. So there's so many layers to this story. First, whenever progressives win or lose congressional races, I call them afterwards because I want to hear what went wrong, what went right, what can we learn from the race. And then I used to ask them, out of curiosity, who else has called you? And then I stopped asking that question because it turns out no one else has called them because no one's ever trying to learn any lessons. I talked to a lot of people in Congress throughout my different years of doing this show, et cetera. And I would ask them, hey, what's your plan for passing this bill or that bill? It's shocking. Almost no one has any plans. Almost no one is learning any lessons. Like, people in politics are stunningly incompetent. And by the way, that's exactly how AOC and honestly, we beat Joe Crowley. Right? So we started Just Democrats right here on Young Turks. You guys saw it happen with your own eyes. And nobody thought we can get anybody elected. And then boom, we knocked out Joe Crowley in one of the biggest political upsets of all time. Now, AOC, obviously the biggest part of that. But I would argue that the second biggest person involved is Shoykat Chakrabarti, the person that you just mentioned there. He was the head of Justice Democrats, then he was the campaign manager for AOC, and then her chief of staff. And then another absolutely pivotal person there was Corbin Trent, who was communications director, again, for all three of those things, Just Democrats, then AOC's campaign, then her congressional office. And what is amazing is after all this time, after one of the greatest upsets in political history, no one's ever asked Shoykot and Corbin to run another campaign. Well, other than me, okay? But like, isn't that unbelievable? But there is a reason why. The reason is they don't want to know, because they want to run campaigns that maximizes the amount of money that those consultants make. And you maximize the money by spending as much as humanly possible, because the campaign managers or consultants usually get 15% of how much you spend in advertising. So they have an incentive to run the world's worst campaigns. The more inefficient the campaign is, the more money they're going to make. So if Shoykot and AOC and us, we all come in and we tell them how to run efficient campaigns, they're like, well, I don't want to hear that. They're like, oh, don't let him anywhere near the candidate, because then we won't be able to rob the candidate nearly as well as we do now. And guys, but more importantly than all of that is, these people in DC are fossils. I mean, they came up in politics like 90 years ago. And they're like, all politics is local. That's what Tip O'Neill said. But look, guys, that was 280 years ago. All politics was local because people got their news from local newspapers. Local newspapers barely exist anymore. People get their news online and in cable news, etc. It's not local at all. All politics is national now. So they can't adjust at all. They don't want to adjust. So that's the political side of it in terms of campaigns. Now, when you get to the actual disagreement with Pelosi and AOC, I might have some surprising thoughts there, which is that I don't find any of this to be like, well, first of all, it's not a revelation to me because I was there. I was there behind the scenes and in front of the scenes, etc. But it's a great book. Don't get me wrong. Ryan Grimm's great. His other books on shoptyt.com. We should put that up there as well. And Ryan's been a TYT contributor. But more importantly, in the beginning, AOC challenged Nancy Pelosi. And that's what Ryan writes about. And that's when Shoykot and Corbin were there. And that's when we were in insurgency. That's when we were in open rebellion. But after Shoykot and Corbin were shown the door about 6 months in, I haven't seen a rebellion since. So I don't know what Nancy Pelosi and AOC were disagreeing about, because they barely, I didn't see AOC stand up to Nancy Pelosi on policy almost at all after the beginning.
I think there's a couple factors at play here. The campaign, which I think was great, also benefited from New York Democrats just relying on the machine in that state, not really campaigning. I mean, Crowley was really absent in his district every midterm. They just took it for granted. And you saw that same pattern play out again when Bowman challenged Eliot Engel. You might even remember the hot mic moment where Eliot Engel was heard at a press conference admitting he was only there that year because he had a primary challenger. That's how little they care about people in their district, especially when they live in what they see as a safe district or safe seat. So I hope people take that into consideration and more progressives run and challenge incumbent Democrats, because you're going to get better responses. You're going to get more attention from your member of Congress who should care about you to begin with. But I also want to point out on the two Justice Democrat staffers who haven't been offered roles, it's a really difficult environment to navigate, because not only does the DCCC have all this infrastructure and all these vendors, they'll blacklist anybody who works for progressives. So if you want to work and have a long career in politics, you kind of have to make that calculation. And look, there's a lot of people who are just in it for money. I don't think that's the way you should operate professionally, but sadly there are. And when they see, hey, I can go work for someone whose views align with mine more, or I can go and not be blacklisted and work on some no-name moderate who probably won't win, but at least I'll get future jobs. And that's a calculation, sadly, a lot of people need to make because of this blacklist.
All right, we can get into a little bit more about this feud between Nancy Pelosi and AOC and how that's changed. Now, he cites to texts from AOC throughout the book. One focuses on the 49-year age gap between her and Pelosi. The amount of time she told me that stupid, I have protest signs older than you in my basement crap. Like, yeah, but mine don't collect dust. And then there's another text from spring this year where AOC reflected on how her life changed after Nancy Pelosi stepped down from leadership and Hakeem Jeffries took over. She says, I thought things would get worse. I thought a lot of my misery was due to leadership more broadly having a thing against me, but my life has completely transformed. It's crazy. And it's that made me realize it was kind of just Pelosi the whole time. She also adds, senior members talk to me. Committee chairs are nice to me. People want to work together. I'm shocked. I couldn't even get floor time before. I'll say, this doesn't matter that much to me, whether or not Nancy Pelosi was being petty. I mean, I know how petty politics operates in Washington. For me, it doesn't make a difference because Hakeem Jeffries is still, in my opinion, to the right of Nancy Pelosi. So even if people are willing to talk to AOC, I haven't seen that play out in legislation. I haven't seen that play out in, manifesting progressive change. So I think it's a really interesting thing to explore, but for me, it doesn't really change anything for the rest of us. I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts on this?
Yeah, 100%. I want to get to that in a second. First of all, that poster line always drives me crazy. I remember when that first got into the news, I was like, she's like, oh, I've got a poster in my basement for universal health care from 50 years ago. And I'm like, well, how's that working out for you? I mean, you were the Speaker of the House twice, Nancy Pelosi. You were the Democratic leader in the House for decades. Well, if you didn't get it done, that's on you, isn't it? I mean, you're kind of humble bragging about how much you suck. That's not how it really works. So, oh yeah, I've been not trying to get this done for 30, 40 years. Okay, all right, congrats. So, and by the way, if you were busting your ass and you were really trying hard, which she did not at all, she just took tons of corporate cash and stuffed it in her mouth. She doesn't want universal health care coverage at all. She called it the Green Dream or whatever for Green New Deal, and for Medicare for All, she was wildly dismissive, saying that's when she did the line about there's only 4 of them, who cares about them and stuff. So, but that leads to my second point, which is I don't understand why AOC was surprised by any of that. And again, here I have personal experience, a co-founder of Just Democrats. It's not like I knew every detail of the campaign. It's not like, I'm not trying to claim any kind of special knowledge that I don't have, but I talked to AOC many times before the primary, after the primary, and only a couple times after she became a congressperson, because then she became very important. But afterwards, after she won, we talked many times, and I told her Nancy Pelosi is not your friend, and she's like, "Oh no, I know." And I said, "Look, she's going to do a bunch of tricks, etc." And she's like, "I know." And in fact, she told me about something that Nancy Pelosi did in the beginning. That was a private conversation, so I'm not going to say what. And AOC did a great job of resisting that. Terrific. So when did you become surprised that Nancy Pelosi is not your friend? If Nancy Pelosi is your friend, you're going in the wrong direction. Like, as a progressive who's looking to overthrow the establishment, you should expect that the establishment is going to fight you, and you should have plans for how you're going to get around them, how you're going to actually pass the bills without getting enough floor time, because you should expect that they're going to cut down your floor time. They're going to try to keep you off of committees, et cetera. Because if you're on those committees and they're not doing anything against you, that means you aren't creating any good trouble at all, that you're being a good boy and girl. And so I'm just bewildered by why she thinks Nancy Pelosi was supposed to be nice to her. And now she says, oh, but don't worry, Hakeem Jeffries is nice to me. No, I'm more worried now. I'm not less worried. Hakeem Jeffries is totally right wing. Why is he being nice to you? Look, right now they should be challenging Hakeem Jeffries on everything under the sun, including, hey guys, what's our plan to pass paid family leave on a single issue vote, right? Now, I know that it's McCarthy, I'm sorry, not McCarthy anymore, but the Republicans hold the House. Obviously, Mike Johnson is that's his name sounds funny every time, is the Speaker of the House, so we can't introduce bills here. But how can we put pressure on the Senate so that Bernie or Schumer proposes paid family leave? What are we doing? And if you don't, I'm going to put pressure on you to put pressure on Schumer. No, nothing, zero. Nobody's even trying. So of course you and Hakeem Jeffries are getting along, because honestly, both of you are sitting there not doing much. And I mean, I hate saying it. I hate it. And I wish she was, continued as she began and was a lion and she was causing all sorts of great trouble. And the Pelosi and Jeffries were like, oh, this AOC, she keeps trying to pass bills. We hate it, right? But that's just not happening if we're being honest.
I don't think we should discount the way Pelosi wielded power when she was Speaker or House Leader. So I totally hear the Congresswoman when she's talking about the animus that Pelosi definitely had for her and other squad members. On the Jeffries point, I'm with you, Cenk. It is alarming. If you recall, a couple years ago, Jeffries and Josh Gottheimer started Team Blue PAC, which was specifically created to go after Justice Democrats in the House. So that's your House minority leader right now. He was teaming up with someone who even worked to block things Biden was doing in Gottheimer the first 2 years when they had control of both parts of Congress. So they would rather have someone like that who is an obstacle to even moderate progress on things like infrastructure and Build Back Better, which is really the biggest priority for the Biden administration. They would rather have him in there because he's willing to accept corporate donations, willing to defend the status quo, than people like AOC and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, who would support infrastructure bills and who would support Build Back Better because it's decent policy. But they just hate progressives. So they created this PAC to go after Justice Democrats. It's absurd. I'm with you. You should be more worried. But I think part of it is, like you said, it's easy to be reactive right now. They're just letting Republicans self-destruct. I mean, how many times have we had a speaker vote already this year? How many times have they had different flare-ups within the House GOP caucus? And then today, Rayyvana's close personal friend was expelled from Congress. So, we're taking a moment to reflect on that. But it is easier right now for AOC to probably navigate when they're just being reactive to the self-destruction of the Republican Party.
But Jordan, I want to build on something you said there. And look, I'm going to be harsh, but the reason is because I'm being honest. The progressives that got in, their job was to do a couple of things. And one was to fight for the bills that we all care about. And they didn't. They went with the trust Biden strategy that Pramila Jayapal came up with, and they trusted him right off a cliff. And almost our entire agenda was killed by Joe Manchin, and they never pushed back. So let's just be honest about that. And so that was already a dramatic failure. And it's not to say they're not doing anything good. They're great on Gaza and protecting Palestinian lives now. There's tons of nuance, right? But the second problem is an even bigger problem, if you ask me, which is they were supposed to go in and open the door. I know we came up with a plan. They were supposed to go in and open the door for other progressives, right? Because you're not going to get the job done with 4 progressives or 11 progressives. You need to get a lot more in. And in order to get more progressives in, you have to have them run against incumbents. And so if they're running against incumbents, then Hakeem Jeffries is going to be really, really mad. That's why he formed the PAC that Jordan's talking about. And they don't mind saying their intentions at all. Hakeem Jeffries starts a PAC to destroy progressives. That person is not your friend. That person is the one blocking the door. You're supposed to move his ass and open the door for everyone else. If you just got comfortable inside the castle, that wasn't the job. That's not why we sent you. Where are the progressives who are supposed to open the door?
If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.